Good day to you. Thank you for joining me on the Wine Road once again. I'm Jeff Davis. I'll be back with a new episode within 2 weeks. But as I finish up some traveling, please enjoy this classic episode from 4 years ago. I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.
We've been here for, 137 years. If you want to see where California champagne is made in the United States, Korbel is the place to come.
In September of 2021, the Sonoma County Vintners chose Gary Heck of Korbel Champagne Cellars as the Vintners honoree for their annual Sonoma County Wine Auction. They asked if I wouldn't mind interviewing Gary, and of course I was honored to do so. Gary Heck is the president, chairman, and owner of California's original and oldest champagne house. Legally, sparkling wine made in the U.S. cannot use the term champagne. Only French sparkling made in the Champagne region can be referred to on a label as champagne. Gary will explain how Korbel gets around that rule. As you'll hear, Korbel Champagne Cellars has a dramatic and multi-layered history. Gary spent nearly his entire life on the Korbel property. For the interview, I met him poolside. Yes, just off the bottle-shaped swimming pool that's on the grounds of Korbel, and we started off on the right foot. Or should I say, with the right glass. Well, Gary, since we have a mimosa in front of me, we should do a cheers to your recognition.
Cheers. Thank you very much. Quite an honor.
Well, thank you for having Korbel champagne and orange juice waiting for me.
Well, that's what you do when you come to a champagne company. You have a little bit of orange juice and champagne and start the day off.
Right. Yeah, so congratulations on being named Vintner honoree for this year's Sonoma County Wine Auction.
Well, thank you very much. It's quite an honor. I'm very honored to be the one they've chose this year. It's just great. It's great for the company. It's great for the industry. We've been around here a long time.
Right, and you followed in your father's footsteps here at the Korbel Champagne Cellars, so your family has a long history.
That's correct. Dad bought Korbel in 1954, and I was like 4 years old at the time, and then I went to school right about 100 yards that way, one-room school called Ridenour School, and it was 8 grades, 1 teacher, and 1 room.
Wow, it's just like
that's the old days.
Yes, it is. Boy, yeah, it's so funny. You haven't gone very far in your whole life and career, have you?
No, not really. Back in those days, I rode my horse to school.
Oh, how fun.
At one time we had 72 horses here on the ranch, and all of us kids grew up here. My cousins and my brother and my sisters and stuff, we all grew up here, and we all went to Ridenour School. Like I said, it was 8 grades and 1 teacher, Mrs. Johnson.
Boy, yeah, that does sound like almost like the 1800s there.
It is. It was.
It wasn't lost to me either that when you took over for your father in 1982, that was exactly 100 years after the Korbel brothers established the winery.
That's correct, yes.
1882 when the winery started, but they were here long before that.
Yeah, the Korbels came here in about the 1870s, and mostly for the redwood trees, and after they cut the redwood trees down, they try to grow prunes and apples and all kinds of stuff, but it was a little chilly out here, so once they got some information about planting grapes, that's really how it got started. Is after they removed most of the trees, they started doing other agricultural stuff. But grapes is what seemed to stick.
And interesting that they obtained that information that it could be a good grape growing area from UC Davis.
They got the information from the University of California. They said that the climate is more suitable for the Chardonnays and Pinot Noirs for the Champagne style because you're not going to get them ripe enough out here to make wine, so that's what they started. They started making their champagne.
Watching that video on your website, I was amazed with the history of the Korbel brothers, and especially Francis being jailed in Prague.
Yeah. That's probably part of the history we ought to try to rewrite or something. It's not the greatest accolade in the world, the guy going to jail, but it was a student uprising is what he was doing. I mean, I guess they were being treated very poorly over there, and somehow a gun went off. I don't know if he had it or not, but there was a shot fired, and he was arrested, and he went to prison.
And it was a tower.
It was a tower. The tower that's out here at Korbel, which is our brandy tower, right behind the main building. It's a replica of the prison tower. It's kind of interesting because he was in jail over there for a while, and then his mother would come and visit him, and the way he got out is his mother went into jail one day and took some clothes. I guess they probably wore the striped uniforms or whatever in jail in those days. Well, she brought in a set of clothes for him with a hat, and he put on the hat and put on some clothes and walked right out the door.
Right.
She was wearing the clothes in and over the top of her regular clothes, and they gave them to him. So they didn't. She didn't walk in with a bag full of clothes.
Right.
So she had to just, kind of sneak them in there. And once she got him in there, he put them on and left his prison uniform behind. Just walked out the door.
Well, I think it's fantastic that I guess he and his brothers built that tower, right? And
yes.
It's kind of his way of saying, I spent a little time there, but I left, and he hasn't forgotten that period of his life. And because it's round, it's almost like a finger to Prague, in a sense.
I've seen pictures of Prague and seen the prison. Now it was much bigger than this little tower that we have here, because this was just basically housed for the brandy still when they put the brandy still in 1880 something, and in 1889 they came out with their first Korbel brandy. But the tower is still standing. You'll notice in front of the winery, the tower is brick, and the front of the building is brick, and then a lot of bricks around the property, and quite a few of the buildings that are older that are brick, like the Vinegar Tower walking up there past the Brandy Tower. All those bricks were made here.
Yeah.
All the bricks were made in the front of the winery. They had, above the parking lot, they had an area there where they actually made the bricks. So all the bricks and all the beams and everything were made from all the redwood trees here on the property, because they had a mill down in about where the employee parking lot is, where they made not only the cigar box wood, but they also made big beams for the center of the building that holds up the winery, the Brandy Tower. Everything was built here on site from all the lumber and materials they had here on property.
And that was initially for their cigar box business, is that
yes.
right?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, so they weren't even thinking about wine at that point.
No, not originally. They came up here because they knew the cigar box making. They learned that in New York, and then they came out to California, and they came up to the redwood country up here and bought most of the land up here, and cut most of the trees down. Everything you look out here at Korbel is basically all second growth. If you want to see first growth, you got to go to Armstrong Woods in Guerneville. It's an absolutely gorgeous place to visit, by the way. But everything you see around here is all second growth. You'd never know as big as some of these trees are, but it is second growth redwood.
And even the vineyard across the street, that was all trees.
That was all trees.
What fascinates me the most about their story, he went to Holland and his brothers joined him and they came, like you mentioned, to New York City. But how did they have the money to buy the land and all of that? Because it didn't sound like they were terribly, rich at that point.
My understanding that most of this land was 25 cents an acre.
That's part of it, because there wasn't much up here.
No, there's nothing here. You had to hike into here. They actually built part of the railroad to get from here to Rio Neto, because the railroad only came through Monterio and then came up to Rio Neto and stopped. So they built the railroad from Rio Neto all the way to about Maribel, where it crosses the highway there. But they did build most of the railroad, and we have the original railroad station still down there in front of the winery.
Yeah. Not only do they have the railway and the station, but they owned a schooner and a steamship and a printing press.
Yes, they were quite instrumental in most everything they did here at the winery. They did on premises itself, and like you said, they had a ship. So when they got to San Francisco and they wanted to ship something to New York, they loaded up their schooner with all the redwood logs and everything, and then shipped it around the Horn in those days. There's a story that when the Korbels first came here, that once they left New York, they came to California. They actually started to come to California because of the gold rush.
Right.
And when they got here, it was over with.
It took them so long to get here.
It. It took them 3 years to get from New York to San Francisco. It's a little hard for me to believe, but that's what the historians say. That it took them 3 years.
They must have stopped somewhere along the way.
They had to. They had to.
Yeah. And the printing press was created because they wanted to have their own newspaper too.
Yes, they did. They had a newspaper called The Wasp, which was anti-government kind of a hysterical magazine that they published, and it was. We still have some of the old old Wasp magazines around.
Oh, that's great.
That's on the tour.
And that they called it the Wasp because it was stinging.
Yeah, it was
commentary.
stinging politicians, I guess.
That's clever. The family members of Korbel's weren't really into it after Prohibition and later on, so they sold to your father in 1954.
1954, that's correct, yeah.
But I read that your father was, at that point, was a third-generation winemaker, so what was the history of the Hecks in the wine business?
Oh, it goes way back. My great-great-grandfather had a winery in Alsace-Lorraine in Germany. Germany or France, depending on what war you're talking about. Half the time Alsace was French, half the time it was Germany, depending on the war. And then his son, who was Adolf I, he worked in St. Louis, Missouri, and had Cook's Imperial Champagne Cellars, which is, I don't know if you remember the Cook's label. The label's still out there, Cook's. Yeah. But remember when it had the flag that had the ships on it? That's way before your time. But anyway, that was my grandfather's winery. And my dad actually went to Germany prior to the war to Geisenheim University to study winemaking, got his winemaking degree, and came back in 1938. He said there was all kinds of stuff going on over there, and he said that Hitler had people marching with their shovels and brooms and stuff, and he got the hell out of there and came home, and then he went to work for National Distillers up in Asti and ran 7 wineries up there. Okay. In 1950, National Distillers bought Italian Swiss Colony. Up here in Asti, and they made my dad president of Italian Swiss Colony and moved him out to San Rafael, and he and my uncle ran Italian Swiss Colony, and in those days was the largest winery in the United States.
Yes. What a history that place has.
Yeah, well, boy, that has lots of history.
I mean, you can throw out a bunch of names, and you can say, oh, yeah, they worked there. They worked there.
Yeah, and then in 1950, he came out to run Italian Swiss Colony, and then in 1954, Korbel came up for sale, and it was a dream of his and also my grandfather to buy their own winery, and my great grandfather came out here and looked at Korbel.
Oh, wow. Years before.
Yeah.
Your father was quite an innovator in the business, specifically the Methode Champenoise style of sparkling wine. And then after he passed on to you, you accelerated the growth of the company by adding a variety of styles over the years. Yeah,
different styles. Well, the first one that Dad came up with, actually, Korbel's only made sec.
Oh.
And then in 1956, he started to release the Korbel Brut, which is our mainstay, which is our number one seller. And then in 1960, he came out with the Korbel Natural. And then we just had progressions thereafter of all the different other styles that we do. We do 70 different styles here at the winery now.
Nice. Yeah, on that topic, when my wife and I first moved here in 2011, we enjoyed sitting out on the deck and overlooking the vineyard across the street, but enjoying your Rouge sparkling, that deep, rich-colored Pinot Noir sparkling.
Yeah, real dark red Pinot Noir, red champagne, goes great with steaks and heavy meats.
Yeah.
Which is not a heavy meat, but it does go well with turkeys and Thanksgiving. But Rouge, for a long time, was our number one seller in the wine shop.
So that doesn't surprise me. Yeah, we gravitated to that pretty quickly and came back out here on a number of occasions to enjoy it again.
Yeah, you can find it some places throughout the country, the Rouge, but it's mostly sold through our wine shop here.
Mm-hmm. What other tempting ideas or innovations were adopted here at Korbel from your imagination?
Well, not so much mine, but Dad was the one that invented the automatic riddling racks.
Right.
We used to have the A-frames throughout the whole plant, and a good riddler could do about 80,000 bottles a day.
Oh, gosh.
And, it was a little tough on your arm to riddle 80,000 bottles a day, but Dad invented the automatic riddling rack, which he actually just flattened out the A-frames and then put vibrators on them and put them in layers so that you can see them on the tour. I'm sure you've seen them when you've gone through, but that was about 1961, 62 when he first invented those. And that has been a major savings for us here on labor and manpower. And it's more consistent to have them automatically riddled than it is to hand riddle them.
Yeah, I imagine. And, that was long before you heard the term carpal tunnel syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
But surely that must have been the result of.
Well, it is. Yeah, you take those bottles a lot. It does. You grow some different muscles on your arms, though.
Right. Boy, I can't imagine 80,000 in a day.
Yeah.
Later on, I'm going to do the math and figure out how many bottles that was per 10 seconds.
Yeah, if we had a riddling rack here, I could show you how it's done. There's a unique way of doing the riddling, but it does take toll on you. And when I was a kid growing up, and I used to have to go down in the cellars and riddle, it was very interesting because my dad would not let me just have a row. And that was my row. You had to, if you riddled that day on that part of the winery, you were not supposed to go back there and do it the next day. Because I was younger and smaller,
sure. Yeah.
A bigger man could riddle harder than I could. So to be consistent as much as you could in those days, you had to switch off the different sides of the person doing the riddling. That's what was nice about the automatic riddling racks. They're much more consistent.
Right. Yeah. I've also certainly enjoyed your brandy in the past, but didn't realize until I was doing my research for this interview that the brandy goes back to the Korbel brothers era of 1889.
Yes, that's correct.
So
yes.
They've been making it a long time. And has it been consistent that whole time?
There was a time during the war that they did not make any Korbel brandy, and the brandy tower that you see here at the winery, the big tower that is a replica after a prison in Prague. That's a whole other story.
Yeah.
But the brandy tower is where the still was, and it was what they called a Krenz Model 17 still, and it was all copper, and they donated it to the war effort for bullets.
Oh, okay.
But so they didn't have a still for about I think it was 39 to when we fired it back up, and we started stilling again in Bakersfield. We have a plant down there that does all of our brandy production and the distilling. We still do all the bottling here at Korbel, but we make the brandy down in Bakersfield. We just started that in 1975.
And now you have quite a few of those different options.
Yeah, there's 3 different varieties. There's the 100% Chardonnay style brandy. We have our regular brandy, which is our classic brandy. And it's always been a very interesting product because it takes 4 gallons of wine to make 1 gallon of brandy. So you got to use a lot more grapes for brandy. But our number one seller in brandy for the States is Wisconsin.
Oh, really?
Yes.
It doesn't surprise me their brandy is consumed the most in Wisconsin, and I imagine in other cold climate regions. Brandy goes down well in front of a fire on a cool winter's evening. They make and sell a number of styles and aged brandy, which we often have on our shelf at home. At this point, I asked Gary if he was concerned in the 70s, 80s, and 90s when the French champagne companies and Spanish sparkling wine started moving into the Napa, Sonoma, even Mendocino regions of Northern California.
Well, originally we were very concerned about, the French invading us like that, but there's a place for everybody, and there certainly has been a growth in the industry that it certainly has not slowed Korbel's growth down at all. When I took over from my dad, we were doing about 150,000 cases, and this year we'll do 1.6 million. So we've had a little bit of growth since 1982.
I was going to ask you about that because your dad started about 30,000 cases, and he took it up to about 100, 150, and now you're well over 1 million.
Yeah. Dad brought it up quite a bit. He took it from a little regional, almost a local brand to a national brand, and then international after that.
Incredible growth. I do have to ask about, speaking of the French, now here in the States, Chandon cannot call their wine champagne. They do call it Brut, California Brut, but you get away with calling it champagne. You want to explain how you do that?
We are grandfathered in. We've been calling it champagne since 1882, and in 1996, I believe it was, we have an agreement with France and the European Union that because we are grandfathered in, we can call it champagne. Now, you got to understand that we call it champagne, but you have to put the place of origin before the name champagne. So it's got to be either California champagne, Russian River champagne, whatever, if you want to call it champagne. And you have to have it being produced. You can't come up with a new label today and call it California champagne. It's only for the wineries that have been in existence prior to 1996. So anything after that, it has to be called sparkling wine.
You know, a lot of wineries from the pre-Prohibition era struggled at some point over the last 100 years to stay in business. Actually, some didn't make it. But have you faced some challenging times during your tenure here?
Fires, floods. I mean, it's very difficult to keep your head above water a lot of time. But, we're very fortunate here. Our average employee's length of service here is 13 years. Now, most companies are 3 or 4 years, and we're 13. So that means we've got people that are here 35, 40 years and new employees. So, I would say that Korbel's success in the long run is really based on our employee staff. One thing we have been able to do here at Korbel is surround ourselves with people that really are dedicated to, and love the area and love the history and love Korbel.
And you must treat them properly as well.
They're treated fairly, yes, very fairly.
I asked you this earlier, but did it come as a surprise when you were chosen the Vintner Honoree for this year's Sonoma County Wine Auction?
Yes, it's always a surprise because you don't think of things like that when you're working every day, and when somebody gets the title or is honored, you're happy for them, and you don't expect it to come to you. And so when it did come to us and it was brought to me, and they asked me if I would accept it, like, how do you not accept it? It was a great honor. I mean, it's very, very good for Korbel. Not so bad for me either, but it's very nice. Very nice.
Well, especially
nice recognition.
Since you've been members since they started. That's incredible.
Yes, we are. We were one of the founding members. Matter of fact, I was president of the association for 3 years in a row back in the 70s.
I guess you can't choose yourself, can you, as an honoree?
I wouldn't think that'd be too good.
When you come here to Korbel and you sit around, whether you're on the deck of the delicatessen or you're in the tasting room, and you really get a sense of the history here. Just looking around, a lot of the old signage is still here.
Oh, there's lots of history here. Just walking around some of the old buildings. When you walk up past the winery and you see the building on the right there that says the ranch office and general store, that originally was a post office. Uh-huh. So this was actually a town at one time.
Yeah, I could see that.
It was Township of Korbel. Now, once the post office went, so did the legal name of the town. And then they also had up in Arcadia, they had a town, and it's still up there, the town of Korbel.
Oh.
Now, that was also part of Korbel, and the Korbels built the Mad River Arcadia Railroad up there. So they were all over California at one time.
What a history. And you must be very proud.
It's a lot of history here. Yeah, it's just kind of neat just to be sitting here and you're living amongst most of all this history. It's really cool.
Do you feel the spirits kind of hovering around?
Oh, yeah. It seems like you run into ghosts once in a while, but...
You have to imagine that the Korbel family, even the brothers, if they could see what's going on here, they just must be terribly impressed with what you and your father have done.
Yeah, Dad did the hard part, and I took over from there.
Well, congratulations on incredible success here.
This is a wonderful place to be.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You can see the variety of California champagne Korbel has to offer, as well as Prosecco and brandy at Korbel.com. Today's episode was written, recorded, and produced by me. Please subscribe to On the Wine Road podcast so each episode will automatically appear on your favorite platform. And I appreciate a positive review if that's an option. Find images, wine news, trivia, and more interviews at onthewineroad.us. I'm on Facebook as On the Wine Road and Instagram as JD Wine Road. I'll talk to you again soon as I share more from my travels on the Wine Road.